Okay guys, so today I've been called out to a Titanium 40 Combi boiler. Customers reported a water leak and they've put a bucket underneath it. I've opened up the boiler to have a look, and the very first thing that caught my eye is the diverter cartridge leaking, as you can see. But it's not leaking right now, it's dried up by the looks of it. I also noticed that there are some marks on this auto air vent, which is just at the back there. If I can shine my torch on it. So that at some point also leaked, but it seems like it's resealed itself now. But mainly it seems like it's the diverter cartridge, although it seems fairly dry, but I can see some moisture on that clip as well. And the problem with these is that it actually fills up the motor. You can see some marks on the motor as well, as you can see, and then it starts to trip electricity and stuff like that as well with these. So I'm gonna open it up, put a new cartridge, possibly a new actuator, depending on what the quality is like when I open it up, and take it from there. Now what I also do is, before I point out to the customer that that's what's faulty and that's what's wrong basically, I also open up the top combustion chamber just to have a quick look inside to make sure there's nothing leaking in there, because there's nothing worse than you giving a price to a customer based on what you initially saw, and then you realise that there's something else leaking as well, and the customer would be like, why didn't you tell me that before? So it's always best to have a good look, just to make sure you're not missing anything before you give a price or tell customer that that's what's faulty. Now, just making sure everything is dry. There's a bit of moisture there, but it's nothing major. Sometime on these, that grey pipe, condensate pipe in the back, starts to leak, so you need to be careful with that as well. Okay, so now that it's cooled down a bit, it's starting to leak more, as you can see. So it's definitely the cartridge leaking. Now I've got a replacement part for it. So that's a compatible replacement part. So the cartridge is here, as well as the actuator, because 90% of the time when the cartridge goes, it fills the actuator with water as well, and the actuator is fairly noisy on this anyway, so we'll just replace it. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to isolate cold water going into it. In fact, I think I have isolated it already. Yep, so cold water is isolated. I need to isolate flow and return for heating, and then drain the boiler. To drain the boiler, I'm going to be connecting my drain hose to this white drain off point, leave it in a bucket, and then let the boiler drain completely. Once it's drained, then I should be able to remove the cartridge and replace it with a new one, as well as the actuator. The boiler's nearly drained. Let's have a look at the actuator head. Let's just remove this clip. Boiler's safely isolated now. Yeah, as I predicted, it's full of water, as you can see, but thankfully it wasn't turning power off or electricity off. It wasn't creating a short circuit so far, but we will change it with the new one anyway. So the water that was leaking out of the cartridge made its way up into the actuator body, and it's basically filled it, and it's coming out of everywhere you can find any space really, so we'll be changing that. But yeah, this is normal, pretty typical with this setup, and 9 out of 10 it will result in tripping the RCD or creating short circuit. Okay, so the old cartridge can now be removed. All I use to remove these cartridges is my Baxi 6-inch spanner, although I do have a cartridge remover socket that I still need to try one day, but my adjustable spanner does work almost every time. Okay, let's remove this. As is brass, all brass, it came out in one piece, as you can see, and that's what the problem was. It was leaking out of that spindle at the top, and although it's out as one piece, I still like to make sure there's nothing left inside, no pieces left inside. So just make sure you've not left any pieces inside before you put your new cartridge in. After we put the new cartridge in, sometime it traps some air underneath, and when you nip it up, it creates another problem for you. So when you're placing your new cartridge, it's always best to just keep it pressed, or press it a couple of times whilst you're nipping it up. Press the spindle a few times with a screwdriver or something, and then that will allow the water to just go into one of the sides. Basically the heating side is isolated, but it can go to the plate-to-plate heat exchanger side, so it's not going to get trapped, so it's not going to have an airlock just at the bottom section, if it makes sense. Some people suggest to remove the bottom nut and stuff like that. I don't bother with it, to be honest. I just depress that spindle a few times, and that normally works for me. So let's just open up the new cartridge. We'll grease it up and replace it the way we removed the old cartridge out. Let's just do that. Okay guys, sorry for the noise. The boiler's on now and the water was being used downstairs. As you can see, there was a demand on it. That's gone off now, so the boiler should go off. But yeah, the new cartridge and new actuator motors installed. It's they're constantly, they either have a dripping tap or they're opening hot tap and then closing it straight away. But the new cartridge and new motors on now. I refilled the system back up before any of you start jumping up and down, because initially I said I closed or isolated the cold water supply pipe. Now if you're just changing the cartridge and changing the motor, for example, you don't really need to isolate the cold water supply going into the boiler. However, on many occasions when you're trying to replace the cartridge, it may lead to you having to then removing the block to get rid of the pieces from inside, or sometimes it breaks inside and then you have to change the whole of the hydro block. And for that reason, the cold water supply needs to be isolated. So it's always good to just isolate cold as well. But yeah, all back on and all working as it should. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me and I'll try to get back to you. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe the video. Take care. Bye.